Something subtle is happening in global politics right now, and it isn't the kind of moment that forces people to stop everything and look up. There are no urgent announcements, no dramatic press conferences, and no immediate sense of crisis. Yet, beneath the surface, a decision has been made that carries weight far beyond its headlines. New Zealand has quietly chosen to step away from a proposal connected to Donald Trump, reportedly valued at around $1 billion. And while the number itself is striking, the real story here isn't about money. It's about what this decision reveals about the current global atmosphere and how countries are positioning themselves in a world that feels increasingly uncertain. Hi, I'm Janus Juno. Thanks for being here. Today's conversation isn't about reacting emotionally or choosing political sides. It's about understanding why a calm, measured refusal can sometimes say more than an enthusiastic agreement. This moment didn't dominate the news cycle, and that's precisely why it deserves attention. History often shifts quietly before it shifts visibly, and decisions like this tend to matter more in hindsight than they do in real time. At first glance, a $1 billion proposal sounds like something few countries would hesitate to consider. That kind of investment can mean infrastructure development, job creation, economic expansion, and long-term cooperation. In a purely financial sense, the logic appears straightforward. Opportunities like this don't come along every day, especially for smaller nations that rely on stable international partnerships. But global politics is rarely about numbers alone. Every major proposal exists within a broader context, shaped by expectations, relationships, and the tone of the moment in which it's offered. If you value calm, thoughtful analysis that goes deeper than headlines, take a moment to like this video. Subscribe to the channel for more long-form discussions on global politics and world affairs. And feel free to share your perspective in the comments. This conversation is better when more voices are part of it. New Zealand is not a country that seeks influence through force or volume. It doesn't dominate headlines or attempt to shape global conversations through confrontation. Its international identity has been built on consistency, diplomacy, and a preference for multilateral cooperation. That's why this decision stands out. When a country known for restraint chooses distance instead of engagement, it signals that something deeper is being considered. This wasn't a loud rejection, and it wasn't framed as an act of defiance. There were no accusations or dramatic statements. Instead, the response was measured and careful, which makes it more revealing. Quiet decisions often reflect long internal discussions, where risks are weighed not just in economic terms, but in political and ethical ones as well. When New Zealand paused, it wasn't simply evaluating a proposal. It was evaluating the moment itself. Donald Trump's role in this story is important, but not in the way many people might expect. Trump has always approached international relationships with a transactional mindset. Supporters view this as clarity and pragmatism, while critics see it as unpredictability. Regardless of perspective, Trump's approach places emphasis on direct outcomes rather than long-term process. Deals are framed around immediate gains, leverage, and momentum. For some countries, that style feels refreshing. For others, it introduces uncertainty. And uncertainty matters. In global politics, predictability is often as valuable as opportunity. Countries don't just ask, is this deal profitable? They also ask, what does this align us with? And what does this signal about our future direction? New Zealand's hesitation suggests that these questions carried significant weight. It's also important to recognize that this decision didn't happen in isolation. Around the world, many governments are reassessing how they engage with power. The international system is under strain, and long-standing assumptions about stability are being questioned. Economic pressures, geopolitical rivalries, and shifting alliances have created an environment where caution is becoming more common. In that context, stepping back from a major proposal can be seen not as weakness, but as deliberation. From New Zealand's perspective, alignment matters. The country has historically valued partnerships built on shared frameworks, predictable cooperation, and multilateral institutions. While it maintains strong relationships with a variety of global powers, it has consistently avoided positioning itself as a participant in sharp geopolitical divides. Accepting a high-profile proposal tied closely to a single political figure especially one as polarizing as Trump, may have felt like a step toward unpredictability rather than stability. What makes this moment particularly interesting is the broader global response. There was no backlash, no visible pressure campaign, and no rush to reinterpret the decision as hostile. Instead, the reaction was largely observational. Other countries noticed, analysts discussed it, and policymakers quietly took note. In international politics, attention without reaction often signals respect. It suggests that the decision is being understood within its context rather than challenged outright. This also reflects a growing trend in global diplomacy. Countries are becoming more selective about the signals they send. In an era where every move is scrutinized and amplified, restraint has become a strategic choice. Saying no doesn't always mean opposition. Sometimes, it means preservation. It means maintaining flexibility in a system where rigid commitments can quickly become liabilities. From my perspective, this isn't about rejecting Donald Trump personally, nor is it about rejecting the United States as a partner. It's about choosing stability over momentum. New Zealand appears to be saying that in a world filled with rapid shifts and unpredictable turns, slowing down can be a form of strength. This isn't an emotional decision, it's a calculated one. It's also worth noting that this moment challenges a common assumption that financial scale automatically outweighs political risk. In reality, the two are often inseparable. Large sums of money bring large expectations, and those expectations can influence how a country is perceived and how it is treated in future negotiations. By stepping away, New Zealand retained control over its narrative and its options. This decision also invites reflection for larger powers. Influence isn't only measured by the size of an offer, it's measured by how comfortable others feel accepting it. When a proposal creates hesitation rather than enthusiasm, it suggests that trust and predictability are just as important as economic incentives. Power that feels uncertain can push even willing partners into cautious positions. As we look at this moment, it becomes clear that the world is entering a phase where quiet signals carry increasing importance. Countries are communicating not through declarations, but through choices. Not through confrontation, but through alignment. New Zealand's decision fits into this pattern. It doesn't shout, but it speaks. And what it says is that the global environment is shifting. That stability is being redefined. That relationships are being evaluated not only on immediate benefit, but on long-term coherence. This isn't a rejection of opportunity, it's a reassessment of direction. As we move forward, the question isn't whether this decision was right or wrong. The more interesting question is what it reflects about the broader global mood. Why now? Why this approach? And what does it tell us about how countries are preparing for what comes next? These are questions that don't have simple answers, and they aren't meant to. They are the kinds of questions that emerge during transitions, when the old rules no longer feel sufficient and the new ones haven't fully formed yet. New Zealand's choice is one small piece of that larger picture, but it's a revealing one. If this analysis resonates with you, consider subscribing for deeper discussions on global politics and international decisions that often go unnoticed. Share this video with someone who prefers understanding over noise, and add your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective matters as this conversation continues. To understand why New Zealand's decision matters, we need to look more closely at the broader environment in which it was made. Global politics today does not operate in neat categories or clear alliances the way it once did. Instead, it exists in overlapping layers of economics, security, reputation, and long-term positioning. Decisions are rarely about one factor alone. They are about how multiple risks and opportunities intersect at a particular moment in time. Donald Trump's approach to international engagement has always been shaped by a belief in leverage. His worldview treats negotiations as transactions where clarity, pressure, and outcomes matter more than tradition or process. Supporters argue that this cuts through bureaucracy and produces results. Critics argue that it sacrifices stability for speed. What's important here is not which view is correct, but how that approach is perceived by countries that prioritize predictability. For nations like New Zealand, consistency in global relationships is not a luxury, it's a necessity. Smaller and mid-sized countries depend on stable frameworks because unpredictability can carry disproportionate risk. When a proposal is closely associated with a single political figure rather than an enduring institutional framework, it naturally raises questions about longevity. What happens if leadership changes? What happens if priorities shift? What happens if tone replaces structure? This is where caution begins to outweigh enthusiasm. In recent years, many countries have become more sensitive to reputational alignment. Decisions are no longer judged only by domestic benefit, but by how they position a country internationally. Accepting or declining a major proposal sends signals far beyond the immediate partners involved. It communicates values, priorities, and strategic preferences. New Zealand's choice suggests a desire to remain anchored in systems that emphasize continuity over volatility. It's also worth considering the timing. The global system is under visible strain. Trade routes are being reassessed. Security alliances are being tested. Economic dependencies are being reconsidered. In this environment, governments are less willing to make moves that could be interpreted as abrupt or polarizing. Even neutral actions can be misread when the atmosphere is tense. That makes restraint an active strategy rather than a passive one. Trump's return to the political conversation has amplified this sensitivity. His presence alone alters the tone of international discourse. Whether one sees that as strength or disruption, it undeniably forces other actors to adjust. Countries begin asking not just what is being offered, but what accepting that offer might imply about future alignment. In this context, saying no can be a way of maintaining room to maneuver. Another important dimension is multilateralism. New Zealand has consistently expressed support for cooperative systems where decisions are shaped collectively rather than unilaterally. While it maintains strong bilateral relationships, it has historically avoided moves that could be interpreted as undermining shared frameworks. A high-profile proposal tied to a single leader's vision may have felt misaligned with that philosophy, regardless of its financial appeal. This doesn't mean New Zealand is rejecting ambition or growth. It means that growth is being evaluated through a lens that includes political stability, diplomatic balance, and long-term credibility. In an interconnected world, these factors are increasingly inseparable. Economic gain that comes with strategic ambiguity can create costs that are harder to measure, but no less real. The global reaction to this decision reinforces that interpretation. There was no rush to frame the refusal as hostility, no effort to escalate rhetoric. Instead, there was quiet acknowledgement. That kind of response suggests that other governments recognize the logic behind the choice, even if they might act differently in similar circumstances. In diplomacy, understanding without endorsement is still a form of respect. It also highlights a shift in how influence operates. Power is no longer exercised solely through offers or pressure. It's exercised through trust, consistency, and the ability to provide a sense of continuity in uncertain times. When those elements are missing, even substantial incentives can lose their appeal. New Zealand's decision reflects an awareness of this shift. From a broader perspective, this moment illustrates how global politics is becoming less about dramatic turning points and more about gradual recalibration. Countries are adjusting their positions incrementally, responding to subtle changes in tone and direction rather than overt confrontations. These adjustments don't always make headlines, but they shape the environment in which future decisions will be made. It's also important to recognize that refusal does not equal rejection of cooperation. New Zealand has not closed the door to engagement with the United States or with Trump-era initiatives more broadly. It has simply chosen not to step through this particular door at this particular time. That distinction matters. It preserves flexibility while avoiding commitment to a path that may feel uncertain. This approach reflects a growing preference for optionality. Governments want to keep their options open, especially when the global landscape feels unstable. Locking into arrangements that could limit future choices is increasingly seen as risky. By declining the proposal, New Zealand retained the ability to reassess as conditions evolve. The decision also invites reflection on how leadership style affects international confidence. Charisma and decisiveness can be powerful, but they can also create volatility if not balanced by institutional continuity. Countries that value long-term planning may hesitate to align too closely with approaches that appear heavily personality-driven. This is not a judgment. It's an observation about risk perception. As global politics continues to evolve, moments like this will likely become more common. Countries will signal preferences through subtle actions rather than explicit statements. They will choose alignment through omission as much as through declaration. Understanding these signals requires patience and attention to context rather than reliance on surface-level narratives. What we are witnessing is not a breakdown of cooperation, but a redefinition of how cooperation is chosen. New Zealand's decision fits into a broader pattern of careful recalibration. It reflects a desire to navigate complexity without committing to extremes. In doing so, it highlights the growing importance of restraint as a strategic tool. This raises deeper questions about how global leadership is perceived and exercised. Is influence best maintained through bold offers and direct pressure, or through steady presence and predictable behavior? Different countries will answer that question differently, based on their size, history, and priorities. New Zealand's answer, at least in this moment, leans toward the latter. As we continue examining this story, it becomes clear that the most interesting aspects are not the financial figures or the personalities involved, but the underlying dynamics shaping decision-making. This is a story about caution in an age of acceleration, about balance in a time of polarization, and about how quiet choices can carry profound meaning. In the next part, we'll bring these threads together more directly. We'll look at what this moment suggests about the future of international cooperation, how power is being reinterpreted, and what lessons this decision might hold for both large and small nations navigating an uncertain world. As we step back and look at this moment in its entirety, what becomes clear is that New Zealand's decision is not an isolated event. It fits into a much larger pattern that has been forming quietly over the past several years. Around the world, countries are reassessing how they engage with power, how they define partnership, and what kind of future they want to prepare for. This reassessment isn't happening through declarations or dramatic shifts. It's happening through small, deliberate choices that reflect deeper concerns about stability, predictability, and trust. In that sense, New Zealand's refusal tells us less about one proposal and more about a changing mindset. Governments today are increasingly aware that global uncertainty is no longer temporary. It's structural. Economic systems are under pressure, political norms are being tested, and the pace of change has made long-term planning more difficult than it used to be. In this environment, countries are becoming more cautious about decisions that could limit their flexibility or tie them too closely to uncertain trajectories. Donald Trump's role in this broader picture remains complex. His approach to leadership emphasizes decisiveness, leverage, and visible outcomes. For some nations, that style aligns with their own priorities. For others, it introduces variables that are difficult to manage. The question is not whether one approach is inherently right or wrong, but how different styles of leadership interact with a world that is increasingly sensitive to risk. What New Zealand appears to be signaling is a preference for continuity over disruption. That doesn't mean resisting change. It means choosing change carefully. In a global environment where rapid shifts can carry unintended consequences, restraint can be a form of strength. Saying no to a major proposal is not necessarily a rejection of cooperation. It can be a way of protecting long-term autonomy. This perspective also sheds light on how power itself is evolving. Influence today is less about commanding attention and more about inspiring confidence. Countries are watching not just what leaders say, but how consistently they act and how predictable their commitments feel over time. Trust, once weakened, is difficult to rebuild. That reality makes governments more selective about the signals they send and the relationships they emphasize. From this angle, New Zealand's decision reflects an understanding that alignment is not just strategic, it's reputational. Accepting or declining a proposal shapes how a country is perceived by others. It communicates priorities, values, and expectations. In a tightly interconnected world, Those perceptions matter as much as formal agreements. There is also a human dimension that often gets overlooked in discussions like this. Behind every decision are people tasked with weighing not only economic outcomes, but social impact, political stability, and public confidence. Governments are accountable not just to international partners, but to their own citizens. Choosing caution can be a way of maintaining domestic trust in uncertain times. For larger powers, moments like this serve as feedback. They reveal how offers are received, how leadership styles are interpreted, and how global partners are adjusting their expectations. Influence is not static, it responds to context. When proposals are met with hesitation, it's an opportunity to reflect on why. Not every pause is opposition. Sometimes it's a request for reassurance. As the global system continues to shift, we're likely to see more decisions like this, quiet, measured, and deeply contextual. They won't always come with clear explanations or dramatic narratives. Instead, they will require careful interpretation and patience. Understanding them means looking beyond surface-level reactions and paying attention to patterns over time. What makes this moment particularly instructive is how little noise it generated. There was no escalation, no breakdown in relations, no immediate fallout. That absence of drama doesn't mean the decision was insignificant. It means it was handled within a framework of mutual respect and awareness. In today's environment, that in itself is notable. From my perspective, this is a reminder that global politics is not always about bold moves or loud statements. Often, it's about restraint, timing, and the willingness to wait. New Zealand's choice reflects a belief that not every opportunity must be seized immediately, especially when the broader environment feels unsettled. As viewers, it's easy to focus on personalities and headlines. But the deeper story lies in how countries are quietly adapting to a world where certainty is harder to find. This decision is one example of that adaptation. It suggests a desire to remain grounded, flexible, and aligned with long-term principles rather than short-term momentum. Ultimately, the significance of this moment will become clearer with time. Whether it's remembered as a turning point or simply as one step in a gradual recalibration depends on what follows. What matters now is recognizing that these quiet choices are shaping the future, even when they don't command immediate attention. The world is watching, not because of spectacle, but because of meaning. And in global politics, meaning often matters more than volume.